There is something we have forgotten how to do, not something complicated, not something that requires skill, money, or years of practice. Something the simplest people in history did naturally, something children still do before we teach them not to. We have forgotten how to do nothing. And the fact that this sounds strange to you, the fact that doing nothing feels like a waste, like laziness, like something to be ashamed of, that itself is the problem. We live in an age that worships productivity. Every moment must be optimized, every hour accounted for, every gap in the calendar filled with work or self-improvement, or at the very least, the performance of being busy. We wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. We say, "I've been so busy," the way our grandparents said, "I'm doing well." Busyness has become identity. Productivity has become virtue. And stillness, genuine, unproductive, purposeless stillness, has become something close to sin. But something is wrong, because despite all this doing, despite all the productivity apps and morning routines and hustle culture, we are more anxious than ever, more distracted than ever, more empty than ever. And perhaps the reason is simpler than we think. The philosopher Blaise Pascal wrote in the 17th century, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Not war, not poverty, not disease. All of humanity's problems from the inability to sit quietly in a room alone." He wrote this 300 years ago, before smartphones, before social media, before the infinite scroll that now fills every moment of silence we might have accidentally stumbled into. What would Pascal say today? The ancient Romans had a concept they called otium, often translated as leisure. But this translation misses the depth of the word. Otium was not vacation. It was not entertainment. It was not the passive consumption of content to distract yourself from the weight of your own thoughts. Otium was the deliberate, disciplined cultivation of stillness, the art of being present with yourself, without an agenda, without a product, without a goal. Seneca, who advised emperors and outlived several of them, wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Retire into yourself as much as possible. Associate with those who will make a better man of you. Retire into yourself, not into your phone, not into your next project, not into the noise, into yourself." But why is this so difficult? The answer may lie in what happens when we actually stop, when the music goes off, when the screen goes dark, when there is nothing left to do. The thoughts come, not comfortable thoughts, not the pleasant daydreams we might prefer. The real ones, the ones we have been running from, the relationship we haven't dealt with, the decision we keep postponing, the question we are terrified to answer. Is this the life I actually want? Busyness, it turns out, is one of the most effective forms of avoidance ever invented. If you are always doing something, always producing, always consuming, always optimizing, you never have to sit with yourself long enough to hear what you actually think. The psychologist Eckhart Tolle observed that most human beings cannot tolerate more than a few seconds of pure silence before reaching for something, anything, to fill it. We check our phones in elevators. We listen to podcasts in the shower. We scroll before we sleep and scroll when we wake. Not because we are addicted, though perhaps we are, but because the alternative is frightening. The alternative is presence, and presence means encountering yourself. The Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi wrote about what he called wu-wei, often translated as non-action or effortless action. But wu-wei is not passivity. It is not giving up or checking out. It is the deep recognition that the constant striving, the relentless doing, the perpetual motion of modern life is often working against us, that the tree does not strain to grow, that water does not force its way through stone. It simply persists gently until the stone gives way, that there is a kind of intelligence in stillness that cannot be accessed through effort, a kind of knowing that only comes when you finally stop trying to know. Science in recent decades has begun to catch up with what philosophers knew centuries ago. Neuroscientists discovered something they call the default mode network, a system in the brain that activates not when we are focused on a task, but when we are doing nothing, when we are resting, when we are daydreaming, when we allow the mind to wander without direction or purpose. And what does this network do? It processes emotion. It consolidates memory. It generates creativity. It constructs the narrative of who we are. In other words, the brain does some of its most important work precisely when we stop making it work. The insight that arrives in the shower, the solution that comes on a walk, the sudden clarity that appears after a night of sleep. These are not accidents. They are the default mode network, doing what it was designed to do. Think when you finally stop thinking. But here is the paradox. Doing nothing is extraordinarily difficult, not because we lack the time, though we tell ourselves that, but because we have lost the capacity. We have trained our attention to expect constant stimulation. We have conditioned our minds to equate stillness with emptiness, and emptiness with failure. And so when we finally sit down, when we close the laptop and put down the phone, and try to simply be, we last approximately 45 seconds before the discomfort becomes unbearable, before we reach for something, before we feel the silence, before we run, again, from ourselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present, not the future with its endless planning, not the past with its unresolved weight. The present, this moment, this room, this breath." The Stoics called this practice prososh, attention to the present moment, not as a spiritual exercise, not as a performance of mindfulness, but as the most practical act available to a human being, to actually be where you are. There is a Japanese aesthetic principle called ma. It is the concept of negative space, the pause between notes in music, the empty space in a painting, the silence between words in a conversation. Ma is not emptiness in the sense of absence. It is emptiness in the sense of potential, the pause that makes the music possible, the silence that makes the word meaningful, the rest that makes the action powerful. Without ma, without space, everything collapses into noise. This is what we have done to our lives. We have filled every moment until there is no ma left. No pause, no space, no silence. And we wonder why everything feels like noise. So what would it mean to do nothing? Not to scroll mindlessly, not to binge something, not to fill the time with productive leisure, but to actually sit in a chair, on the floor, under a tree, and do nothing, to watch the light change, to notice your breathing, to let thoughts come and go, without grabbing onto them or pushing them away, to simply be here, in this moment, in this body, in this life, for 5 minutes, or 10, or however long it takes, before the discomfort softens into something unexpected, into quiet, into space, into the strange and unfamiliar feeling of being at home in your own mind. Pascal was right. The inability to sit quietly in a room alone is at the root of so much of what we suffer, not because sitting quietly solves anything, but because it stops the running. And when you stop running, when you finally completely stop, you discover something that all the busyness was hiding, that you are still here, that the silence is not empty, that underneath all the noise and motion and striving, there is something that has been waiting quietly for you to notice it, something that does not need to be productive, something that does not need to be optimized, something that simply is. Do nothing today, not because you have earned it, not as a reward for your productivity, but because you are a human being, not a human doing. And sometimes, the most important thing you can do is nothing at all. Think about it.